Thank you all for being here. Does everybody know who A.J. Jacobs is? A wonderful, wonderful author. I used to be a colleague of his at Esquire, and then he flew the coop and started writing very strange and wonderful books. I'm going to give a talk that I call Food, Family, Memory, and Meaning. And this talk begins in Columbus, Ohio, the city of my birth, a city not known historically for great cuisine. But there is some there now. People ask me all the time, what are the hot new trends in food? And I always say, I don't care, because I really don't. But there's one trend in food that I care deeply about and that I think is really, really wonderful. And that is that compared to 10 years ago, 20 years ago, certainly 30 years ago, you can get great food in almost any American city. And that happened to me recently in Columbus, Ohio, and that's what I'm going to close this talk with when I get to that. But what I wanted to start with is when I talk about food, family, memory, and meaning, I think of some of the delicacies that my family prepared over the years. And particularly because I lost my father in 2008, thinking about these foods and talking about these experiences and things that we did with him and as a family, the things that we ate and the things that we cooked, is meaningful to me. And it takes me back. And I can taste those flavors and I can remember my dad and some of his quirks. And so I'd like to talk about a few of those things with you today. And maybe some of them will be dishes that you've had as well. My folks were both from the South. My dad was from Palatka, Florida. My mom was from a small town in South Carolina. So that informs most of what she cooked. And it was, I'm lucky enough to have a job on Food Network where I spend, actually they're long days, they're 12-hour days, but our shoot days, all we have to do all day is talk about what would you cook. If you've never seen Chopped, it's a competition show among chefs. And we give them mystery baskets full of horrible things. Like Rocky Mountain oysters and Pabst Blue Ribbon's not so bad. Chicken feet, things that just don't go well together. Fermented eggs, things that just aren't likely to. Gummy worms we use a lot of. And there's really only one thing you can do with a gummy worm on Chopped, which is to put it in an acidic liquid or even just water, heat it up and melt it. And then what do you have? You have iridescent green, sweet liquid. It doesn't really bode well. But I love my job, I love chefs, I love food, and I guess the point of the talk when I get there is just to sort of demonstrate why this means so much to me, why food is of such profound importance, why I think it's important for us to eat together as families, as friends, why I think it's so profoundly meaningful for us to cook together, why I think it matters to eat good food, real food, not the kind of food that Andy was just talking about so much. And I think it's something that we can all achieve. So I want to start with one of my favorite desserts in the world. And I like to, you know the banana pudding from the back of the vanilla wafers box? Have you all had that with the meringue on the top and you burn it just a little bit? I call that the tiramisu of the South. And if you've ever had tiramisu, that's made with boxed ladyfinger cookies, store-bought cookies, as is the vanilla wafers banana pudding. What you may not, and you might think about that as sort of an old-school homey dessert, but it's also an honest-to-goodness scratch custard. It's real cooking. It's really a wonderful thing. My grandma Allen used to make that stuff, and there were always leftovers, and I would raid the fridge in the middle of the night, eat it cold, right out of the bowl, and every time I have that stuff, it just takes me back. It brings back so many memories. Once, somewhere over the years, the people at Nilla Wafers thought it would be a good idea to remove the scratch custard recipe and suggest that you instead use pudding from a box. This was a bad idea, and America revolted, and the Nilla company, I believe it's Nabisco, put the real recipe back on that box, and it's still there to this day. My family, my mother was a good cook. She made her barbecued pork chops in the crock pot. She'd put them in the morning with barbecue sauce, cook them for about 17 hours. I could taste them right now. She wasn't big into searing things, so they had kind of a funny color. But despite that, Mom always had salads, always had vegetables available to us, put dinner on the table every night. The only lettuce that existed at the time was iceberg lettuce. We liked Kraft Zesty Italian. I'm not paid to say that. These days, Mom is more of a lemon juice gal. But you know, back in the 70s and 80s when I was, well, in 60s even, you couldn't even buy olive oil in the grocery store. Today you can buy about 75 kinds. During the 70s, there was a research study done on diet soda, which at the time was sweetened with saccharin. And this study revealed that saccharin caused cancer in laboratory rats. This really pissed off my mom, because she really liked her tea sweetened with saccharin. My mom stocked up. She actually stockpiled. She hoarded saccharin. It came in these little tablets. If anybody here was into drugs, they kind of look like microdots. And that was my mom's method of protesting. Rice Aroni was a real treat for us. One of the first things I ever cooked was rice Aroni. And I remember one day I was working on my latest cookbook, and it occurred to me that almost anything I think is delicious is toasted or is toasty. And I had the great idea I was making Israeli couscous, pearl couscous, which is really just a pasta, little tiny balls of pasta. And I thought, what if I toasted that first before I boiled it in chicken stock? And it really improved the flavor. And I thought, wow, I am a super genius. And then I went to my local gourmet market and discovered that the Sicilians have been doing this for years. But if you think about how you make rice Aroni, you do that. It has little pieces of vermicelli in addition to the rice, and you toast it in a dry skillet before you cook it. And that, I think, was one of the earlier food epiphanies that I ever had. My family, my parents were of the generation, they were born in 1940 and 1941, and they became the generation that thought that food was something, that cooking was something to be avoided, that cooking was something we needed to get away from, that it was drudgery. Naturally, it's a privilege to have the freedom and the time and the money to cook for pleasure. But my parents' generation wanted to get away from it. We had the most beautiful microwave oven that's ever been built. We had an Amana radar range. Did anybody have one of those? That thing was it was chrome, it had fins, it looked like a Cadillac from the 50s. It was huge. And when we got it, I thought, wow, we can put a turkey in there and it'll be done in 5 minutes. Not the case at all. I use my microwave mainly to heat up frozen chicken stock. I don't do much else with it. But it was a measure of the progress that my family and their generation were hoping to attain. My mom cooks a lot more now. My father had an extraordinary weakness for Cheez-Its. He would eat them out of the box. I can't touch a Cheez-It without thinking about my dad. Waldorf salad, pimento cheese sandwiches, chicken livers. My dad loved chicken livers. The rest of us hated the smell, so he didn't get them very often. And roast beef and tomato sandwiches probably was my dad's absolute favorite. But the real issue I need to get to you with, as far as the Allen family delicacies, is one thing that we used to do that was so strange, and I'm just desperately hoping to find one soul, one person in the world who also has prepared this dish. We used to come home from church, and occasionally we would make this. We would crack open a can of salmon. Have you ever had canned salmon? It's something. It's about a 15-ounce can generally. The bones are also inside. The salmon is cooked inside the can, and the little bones are in there as well. And the bones become soft enough that you can just eat them. We would take a can of salmon, put it in a bowl. I'm not kidding. Squirt ketchup on it. Are you still with me? Mash it up with a fork and put it on saltine crackers. So, anybody? And ketchup? Thank you, that's close enough. Thank you very much, madam. Now, you could argue from a culinary point of view that it takes a certain sophisticated palate to appreciate salmon mashed with ketchup and served on a saltine. You have textural contrast. You've got soft fish and crispy crackers. There's some nice salinity there in the saltines, hence the name. There's a certain funkiness to the fish that's cut by the acidity of the ketchup. The Chopped judges are always saying they crave more acidity. They like the brightness that you get from vinegar and lemon juice and lime juice and rhubarb. I had a really wonderful rhubarb salad last night at Prune. Okay, that's close enough. I didn't really get anybody who's actually done the salmon trick, but tuna's pretty, I'm sorry? Salmon loaf. Oh, all right. So I guess we weren't really quite so crazy. You think I should put that in a Chopped mystery basket? Oh, wow. You know, that's a great idea because we're always looking for themes to make the show different, and we could have each judge bring up something strange that their family prepared and force other people to eat it. That's a great idea. I'll try to remember that. Thank you, cousin. By the way, I lived in Chicago for many years, so the lady that referenced Joliet earlier, it's actually pronounced Joliet. It's Joliet. So, it's not, actually, which is funny that a town would be called Joliet when its main claim to fame is a gigantic maximum security prison. Not so jolly. So, that was my childhood in Columbus, Ohio. Pretty standard fare that I think many of us probably also grew up eating. I went back to Columbus, Ohio a couple of months ago to help out with the AIDS Walk in Columbus and in Dayton. Great fundraiser, wonderful community experience, raises a lot of money. And the AIDS Walk Columbus wanted to do a Chopped style cook-off between 4 Columbus chefs. And as I usually do when this idea comes up, I tried to talk them out of it. Because it's, as I mentioned, Chopped shoots for a 12-hour day. We have 10 or 12 cameras. It gets edited like crazy. You don't know what the storylines are going to be until they happen. And live, it almost never works. It's kind of chaotic. I didn't think the food would turn out very well. But they didn't listen to me, and they went ahead and did it. And I want to show you 3 pictures from that experience. Could we have the first picture? It's the group shot that shows myself and a group of chefs. It's probably labeled TED photo number 1. Ah, yes, here we are. Okay. This is at a wonderful venue. Don't I look nice with a beard? My mom hates it when I wear a beard. So I only do it when I'm not on TV, generally. I can't believe that I'm on TV at all. Face made for radio. So this is, this is Jenny Britton Bauer. She's the creator of Jenny's Ice Creams, which are spectacular, wonderful ice creams. Oh, is that for me? Okay. Oh, right. Yeah, thank you. I'll use that in a minute. Jenny Britton Bauer, she and I judged this competition. Next to her is Chef Jacob Howe, and then Chef Eric Donald Kish right here, and then Chef Melissa Miola here, and then Chef William Glover. So I'd like to show you what you can get to eat in Columbus, Ohio today. I don't know if I'm pushing the right button here. There we go. Okay. This is a dish that Jacob cooked. And it was the first dish we tasted. And I knew right away that we were in for a surprise and a treat, because this dish was awesome. Awesome. And very similar to the dish that Bill cooked in some ways, and very different in other ways. So what this is pork belly on top of a corn griddle cake with a sauce that had a little bit of a barbecue energy. and it was absolutely delicious. And Jacob cooked it in a very traditional fashion. He seared it off. Pork belly is where bacon comes from, but a lot of chefs love to cook it today. It's quite rich. It's got a lot of fat in it, but it's really, really good. You need to cook it a long time if you're going to, and it's also not smoked typically. So what you usually do is you sear it off. You develop a lot of flavor by browning things. You sear it off, get it nice and brown, and then you braise it. Jacob braised it for about 3 hours in a local craft beer. So a pretty straightforward traditional approach. But then he got a little weird. Oh, you were telling me there's a laser pointer in here. So see these things here? Those little spheres? One of the mandatory ingredients that these chefs had to use was Ohio honey. Jacob took Ohio honey, watered it down a little bit with some veal stock, and then used one of those molecular gastronomy tools. I think it's called agar, which it's an avant-garde technique that chefs like to use these days. An ingredient that will take a liquid and turn it into a sphere. And so and people usually call these things caviar because it looks like caviar. And when you bite into it, it bursts in your mouth, and it's exciting, and it's full of flavor, and it's got a great texture. And so we have, I loved this dish. So we have and I'm trying to express why this excites me so much. He worked for days and days to develop this and to make it. So we have this rustic sort of corn pancake on the bottom. Then we had the pork belly. We had this beautiful glaze that was also made with a type of bourbon, an Ohio bourbon. Then we had the spherified honey on the top and some greens served on this beautiful sort of earthenware platter. And Jacob came in second. Darn good, though. Darn good. Let's see the next one. This one came in first. This is by William Glover. Also pork belly. Right there. That's a cube of the pork belly. He did it in a different way. There's another sort of avant-garde cooking technique in vogue these days called sous vide cooking, where you take your protein and you seal it you cryovac it. You seal it in a plastic bag. It compresses it, sucks all the air out, compresses it down, and you put it in what's called an immersion circulator, which is a device that heats water to a very precise temperature and keeps it there, and it moves the water around so that whatever you're cooking stays exactly at whatever your desired temperature is, maybe 120 degrees, say. So it's a very slow process. Bill cooked this pork belly for 3 days, 3 solid days. He probably had some flavors infused into there as well. And then, before service, he seared it after the fact, unlike Jacob, who seared it first. So a similar idea, but executed with a little bit different technique. These are hush puppies, jalapeno hush puppies. They were fluffy and ethereal. They were crunchy on the outside. They were so have you guys ever had white truffles? They're very rare and they're very expensive, and even rich people don't get them very often because you can only have them in November. But they almost produce a euphoric feeling when you smell them and eat them. I literally said to Bill, are there truffles in these hush puppies? Because they are so darn good, and I almost thought I tasted truffles. There were no truffles, but still, they were exceptional. Made with the pork was made with watershed bourbon glaze. That's another Ohio bourbon. Jalapeno and Ohio cornmeal hush puppies. Ohio maple fluid gel there. That's the sauce. It was cooked for a long, long time until it reduced down, and it was really grew in intensity. And then a corn puree, and one of these things also is a blackberry ketchup. You know what? I think this is the glaze, and I think that's the blackberry ketchup. Also with a nice element of Midwestern rusticity, served on a ring of wood. I mean, look at that presentation. That's extraordinary. And I get to work with people like this every day. Columbus, Ohio made that, and they make it every day. This could be served in Jeffrey Zakarian's restaurant in New York City. Mark Murphy's restaurant, Alex Guarnaschelli's restaurants, Scott Conant's restaurants. This is world-class, New York City grade, excellent, exquisite, devoted craft cooking in the city of my birth, Columbus, Ohio. I can't begin to tell you how thrilling that is to me. Thrilling. You can get stuff like this in Nashville, Schenectady, Albany, Queens, by the way, as you all know, has some of the greatest cooking in all of New York City from all over the world. We've always had it in New York. It used to be, though, that you couldn't get food like this in Nashville or Orlando, and now you can. So there's a cooking trend that I care about a lot and that I think is awesome. And it all kind of circles back to not just my love for creative, artsy cooking like this, but the intensity of feeling and caring that chefs have for this craft. When you watch our show, if you've ever seen Scott Conant get angry, it's really something to see. I'll do my impersonation. I can't make the veins in my forehead throb, but his do. Let's say you're a cocky young chef and you come into the kitchen into the Chopped kitchen acting like you own the place, and you're smart alecky and your food is not good. Scott will attempt to tell you what you did wrong, and let's say you mouth off in response. Scott will say to you something like this: you and I, we are not having a conversation here. This is an invitation from me to you to cook this pasta correctly. What you do with that invitation is entirely up to you. And he gets genuinely angry when people do things disrespectful to the craft of cooking. Once in a while in our show, someone will make a bad dish, but the producers will ask us to find something nice to say about it because we don't want to give it away who's going to be chopped. And you can find something nice to say about almost anything. Rick Perry, for example, gave an excellent announcement for his candidacy the other day. I thought it was quite stirring. It's not going to work on me, and I'm almost done. When one of our judges is asked to say something nice about a dish that they don't actually like, they'll usually say, "It was a nice presentation," or "I liked the way you put the parsley on it." And when Scott Conant in particular, when Scott tries to say something nice about a dish that he doesn't like, his voice drops. And he'll say, "I like the parsley." But when and Scott and Chris are particularly good examples, when they are excited about a dish, Chris pounds on the table, "This is so great. I like this so much, I'm going to say dirty words that you can't say on Food Network." And then we ask him to say it with a non-dirty word. The passion that drives these people is inescapable, and they can't fake it. If it's bad, they can't fake it, because their passion for this craft is so real and so deep, and means just as much to me, I think, as it does to them. And it's an extraordinary privilege to get to work with these people and to make these shows. We just got renewed for a ton more, so you're not done with us yet. How much of their lives have I wasted so far? Do we have time for a couple of questions?
Absolutely. I'm just here to listen.
Oh, all right. That's pretty much all I got.
Do you want him to ask you questions?
Sure, if anybody wants to. Sure, absolutely, yes.
You only have like one day to live and one last to make out. Say you never even made a choice to do
The question was, if I had one day left to live, what would I eat? My last meal. My partner Barry and I once taught a class at the Institute of Culinary Education that I called Remedial Romantic Dinners. And we prepared a really great fried chicken and served it with champagne. By the way, champagne and fried chicken are excellent together. Excellent. I wholeheartedly recommend it. Go and get a bucket from Popeyes and crack open some Dom Perignon, and you'll see what I'm saying. You know, like, I mean, I just turned a certain age that's kind of a significant one. 29, that's, you know what, when I lie about my age, I always say I'm 76, because then people say, wow, you look good. If I said I was 29, that'd be kind of sad. I celebrated this birthday with 5 of my friends at Per Se. Per Se is a Thomas Keller restaurant. It's catastrophically expensive, and it's about a 4-hour experience of very precious little beautiful pieces of cooking. And I loved it. It was incredible. But I'm just as happy going to Max's Italian Beef in Chicago and getting an Italian beef sandwich. They take the whole sandwich and they dunk it in jus. And so you can have it dunked or not dunked, but you really should get it dunked. It's awesome. It's hard picking just one meal. But I think fried chicken and champagne wouldn't be too bad. Any other questions? I don't know where to begin. Yes? Recipes that have survived through. Well, I'm not so sure. My family wasn't so much about recipes, but Barry's family was. There's one of my favorite things, and it's also probably was created by a company that sold processed foods. We call it chocolate goo. It's a chocolate. It's basically a brownie, and then you pour a cup of hot coffee onto it. And the result is a brownie with a layer of chocolate pudding underneath it. That's pretty incredible. By the way, I forgot to mention one other little fun fact about my growing up and the foods that we used to eat. My grandma Allen, before she would serve the banana pudding, she would often serve lima beans, which I hated with an abiding passion. I like them now. But one of my biggest triumphs, and this also relates to Dad, my dad would make me eat the lima beans. I don't know if you've ever had lima beans. They're very large beans, and my family is of the tradition where you cook beans until teeth are no longer necessary to eat them. And I really hated the texture. And one of the most triumphant moments of my young life, I was probably about 10, was when I realized that you can eat lima beans one at a time, like an aspirin, and chase it with water. And you don't have to experience the flavor at all. And my dad couldn't do a damn thing about it. Are there any kids in the house? You can have that one for free, my friend. Absolutely. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Yeah. Well, it is true that they're looking at the plate the way a painter looks at a canvas, and when you hang a picture, you typically put a mat around it and create some negative space, and they use that term when they're making plates. They also seem to like plates that look like they're kind of swirling around in a circle. But you're right, that's probably about 3 ounces of pork, if that. And he probably charges $30 for it. It's really quite small. Yeah, that's a good point. Doesn't it? I could leave it up there or take it down either way as you wish. But, well, I think that was intended to be part of a multi-course tasting, so you would have probably, 6 or 7 other dishes. But yeah, you're right, those chefs. Food costs are a big deal in restaurants. Yes, either one of you. Oh, well, Barry makes a really mean cake with, what's that cake with the candied lemon zest on the top? I'd probably go for a chocolate cake. It's pretty straightforward stuff. Yes, sir?
On the countdown in the show, is it really that tight that they finish just at the last 5 seconds, or is that just for show?
I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you. On that, okay, so let me just say a couple things about that. On Chopped, they really do have exactly 30 minutes to cook, or 20 minutes, depending on which round. And we stick to that rigorously, and we don't fake anything. I've been on Top Chef, I've judged Top Chef, Iron Chef, and now I host Chopped. And I can say that all three of those shows are scrupulously, rigorously honest, and the decisions on who wins are made entirely by the judges. And the producers might hover around and kind of imply that they wish you'd choose this person over that. But if you've ever seen Top Chef, you know who Tom Colicchio is? The head judge on Top Chef, the guy with the shaved head. Do you actually think some pissant TV producer is going to get Tom Colicchio to do anything Tom Colicchio doesn't want to do? Not going to happen. I will say one thing that we do fake on Chopped is if people are finished early, or if they're not moving around looking excited, we will sometimes do the countdown a second time. They're not allowed to cook anything else, but we'll have them, wipe the edge of the plate or something when I count. I feel like a glorified clock, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And that's the only time we have to mess with that is if they're boring. Because we need it to be exciting. Am I getting the hook? I'm out of here. What? Look who's here. Thank you all very much.